pregnant wife caught her millionaire husband entering a hotel with Mistress. The truth shocked everyone. Lauren Donovan had always believed she'd married the perfect man. Henry Donovan was not just any husband, he was wealthy, generous and charming, with a kind of mesmerizing smile that made even strangers feel at ease. Their life seemed picture perfect, a gorgeous house, a flourishing network of friends, and a supportive family. Yet beneath the glossy veneer, Lauren sensed an invisible tension, the faintest crack in their shimmering world. She'd been trying to ignore it, to trust the man who'd swept her off her feet. But one fateful night outside a luxurious hotel, she discovered Henry's secret, and it was nothing she'd ever imagined. Lauren Donovan woke up in her plush, king-sized bed and listened to the stillness of the morning. Thick blackout curtains dimmed the streaming sunlight. She stretched her limbs and exhaled deeply, mentally preparing herself for another day in the orbit of her husband, millionaire entrepreneur Henry Donovan. The faint hum of the air conditioner accompanied the sound of her heartbeat, an involuntary reminder that life in the Donovan household was rarely calm these days, no matter how it seemed on the surface. She rose quietly, slipped into a soft satin robe, and peeked out the window. Their estate sprawled over several acres of manicured gardens, a shining swimming pool, and tall hedges that protected them from the outside world. Once upon a time, this private sanctuary felt like a cradle of love and security. But over the past few months, an intangible distance had grown between her and Henry. At first, she chalked it up to the usual stresses of running a multi-million-dollar real estate company. Henry's company, Donovan and Finch, had become a major player in the market. Such success often demanded relentless work and plenty of sacrifices. Lauren's mind drifted to a conversation she'd had with her dear friend Rachel Morgan, a savvy stockbroker who had been the one to introduce them in the first place. Rachel had teased Lauren that men like Henry rarely come without baggage, but Lauren, smitten and starry-eyed, had dismissed any warnings. In Henry, she saw ambition, generosity, and a gentleness that belied his commanding presence in the business world. Now, she felt silly for brushing off any cautionary tales. Lately, Henry had been withdrawn. His phone buzzed at odd hours. He'd disappear into his study for late-night conference calls, offering only vague explanations. He seemed to carry burdens that he refused to share. In the mornings, a haunted look flickered behind his eyes, as if he was battling ghosts only he could see. Her hand strayed to her phone on the bedside table. She wondered if maybe she should talk to Rachel again. But before she could decide, the device vibrated with an incoming message. It was from Henry, who was already out of the house, heading out early for an important meeting. Might not be back until late. Don't wait up. Lauren's heart twisted. He'd left without even telling her goodbye. Again, with a growing heaviness in her chest, she made her way downstairs, determined to fill her day with anything that could distract from the mounting suspicion tugging at her mind. Whatever was happening with Henry, she had to believe they could still talk it through if only he'd let her in. Lauren tried her best to go about her day normally. She attended a charity luncheon at the upscale Crestbourne Country Club, a routine event she and Henry usually attended together. But Henry had been missing from such gatherings for months now. At the luncheon, she was surrounded by the social elite women in finely tailored dresses who breezed through conversations about philanthropic causes, international travel, and children's accomplishments. As she sipped on freshly squeezed orange juice, Lauren felt a swirl of unease. Conversations around her blurred as she faked a polite smile. Occasionally, she caught a pitying glance from one of the other wives. She overheard hushed whispers. Henry Donovan's been so absent from the scene. Maybe he's in trouble with his new development. Could be. A man that rich always has secrets. Lauren's cheeks burned. She forced herself to keep her composure, but inside, Her worst fears were being stoked by careless gossip. Rachel Morgan, who had arrived late, noticed Lauren's tension immediately. After the luncheon ended, Rachel pulled her aside. "Lauren, are you okay? You seem out of sorts," Rachel asked, gently pressing a hand on Lauren's arm. Lauren opened her mouth, but she couldn't find the words to explain what she herself didn't fully understand. "He's just been distant," she said, trying to stop her eyes from watering. "Busy, I guess. But it feels different, like something is off." Rachel frowned, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "Have you talked to him? Really sat down and asked him what's going on?" Lauren grimaced. "He doesn't seem to have time to talk. And when he does talk, he insists everything is fine, just business stress. But I found this note in his pocket the other day, some scribbled message about a rendezvous at the Montgomery Hotel. He brushed it off as a business meeting. But why not just say, it's a meeting with so-and-so? Why so secretive?" Rachel's eyes widened at the mention of the Montgomery Hotel, a known luxury spot for clandestine affairs and big money deals. "You should be careful, Lauren. If Henry is, well, if there's more going on, you have a right to know. Men like him, they can get caught up in all kinds of things." Lauren looked at her friend, torn between wanting to trust Henry and fearing the unknown. "I just don't want to jump to conclusions," she whispered, "but I don't know how to handle this." Rachel squeezed her arm. "I'm here. Whatever you need." The conversation played on repeat in Lauren's head as she drove away from the country club. Seeds of doubt had taken root, and no matter how she tried to drown them in logic or trust, they kept sprouting ominously. She had no idea that those seeds would soon flourish into a storm that would uproot everything she believed about her husband and her marriage. Later that evening, Lauren found herself alone in the imposing Donovan mansion. The quietness felt heavy, broken only by the steady ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. She tried distracting herself with a novel, but she couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page, overshadowed by her anxieties about Henry. Where was he? Why was he being so elusive? Around midnight, she heard the hum of Henry's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. She rushed to the window and saw him step out of the car. His posture was tense. He looked over his shoulder before hurrying inside. Something about the way he carried himself, guarded, cautious, made her stomach twist. Lauren stood by the living room fireplace, arms folded, waiting for him. When he entered, she noticed the faint smell of perfume that wasn't hers. Henry's tie was askew, and his eyes darted around as if he were afraid of being watched. "Henry?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with a mix of concern and accusation. "Is everything all right?" He froze, clearly not expecting her to be awake. "Lauren, you're still up." "Hard to sleep when my husband barely comes home," she replied, trying to maintain composure but unable to keep the edge out of her voice. "Where have you been?" He hesitated for an instant before regaining his usual calm. "I had a meeting with some out-of-town investors, then dinner went late." He shrugged off his coat, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't want to wake you." Lauren stared at him. "Henry, we need to talk." He finally met her gaze, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of guilt. Then he nodded. "Yes, we do." But just as her heart quickened, waiting for him to confess, or at least elaborate on what was really going on, he added, "Let's talk tomorrow. I'm exhausted." Without giving her a chance to protest, he strode past her, heading for the stairs. She stood there, heart pounding. The haunting feeling that something was profoundly wrong only intensified. That night, sleep was an impossible companion. She stared at the ceiling, wondering about the faint perfume on his jacket, the tension in his shoulders, and the secrets behind his distant eyes. If only she had known how quickly those secrets would unravel and how drastically they would change her life. In the days that followed, Lauren tried to pry answers from Henry in a gentle but firm way. He continued to wave her off. His schedule was busier than ever, his phone constantly buzzing. At one point, she picked up his phone from the dining table to hand it to him, and he nearly lunged to grab it from her. The sting of suspicion turned into an ache that wouldn't leave her. Just when she thought she might burst from uncertainty, she found a small piece of paper in his study while tidying up. On it was scribbled, "Montgomery Hotel, room 507, 8 p.m. She blinked, her hand beginning to shake. The Montgomery Hotel? The same place she'd overheard other wives gossiping about, the same note in Henry's pocket days before. That night's date was circled in thick pen, and that night was today. Her heart hammered in her chest. No more waiting for him to confess. She needed to see for herself. She quickly called Rachel, voice quivering. "I found a meeting note. Tonight, Montgomery Hotel, room 507. I can't just sit here." Rachel's immediate response was concerned but supportive. "Lauren, do you really want to do this? It could be anything, but if you're that worried, maybe you should go. I can come with you for moral support." Lauren exhaled heavily, torn between fear of facing the truth and desperation for answers. "Yes, please. Thank you." By 7:30 p.m., Lauren was driving her sleek black SUV toward the Montgomery Hotel, Rachel in the passenger seat. The glitzy skyline framed their tense silence. Rachel's presence was reassuring, but it couldn't quench the dread coiling in Lauren's stomach. She was about to spy on her own husband, something she'd never imagined doing in a million years. They arrived at the hotel and parked discreetly. The lobby was golden and opulent, with chandeliers and marble floors that gleamed under warm lights. Lauren's chest was tight with anxiety. They rode the elevator to the 5th floor in silence, hearts pounding in unison. At room 507, Lauren stood outside, listening. She heard low murmuring inside, but couldn't make out the words. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure Rachel could hear it. Then the voices grew louder. Without a second thought, Lauren gripped the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned. She burst in, Rachel right behind her, and found Henry standing there, with a striking brunette in a figure hugging black dress. The woman froze, eyes wide. Henry spun around, looking like he'd seen a ghost. A single moment of dreadful stillness passed. Then Lauren's voice cracked the silence. "Henry, what is going on? Who is she?" Henry's expression flickered between shock, panic, and something that might have been shame. The woman stared, lips parted, but speechless. Lauren's knees threatened to give out beneath her. She had caught him red-handed, or so she believed. In that agonizing moment, every assumption, every fear filled her mind with white-hot intensity. This was it, the nightmare she had dreaded for months. But the truth would prove to be far more complicated than she could ever have imagined. Lauren's heart pounded so violently that she could barely hear over the roar of blood in her ears. Henry's face had lost its color. The brunette stood next to him, looking like she might bolt at any moment. "I'm waiting," Lauren said, her voice shaking. "Who is she, Henry?" Henry opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He glanced at the woman for a fleeting moment, then back to his wife. When he finally spoke, his words were halting, as though he was trying to piece together a puzzle while caught in a web of lies. "Lauren, it's not what it looks like." A bitter laugh escaped Lauren's lips. "Really, Henry? Then please enlighten me, because it sure looks like you're here, in a hotel room with another woman." Rachel, standing behind Lauren, shot a glare at Henry. She looked ready to jump to Lauren's defense if he tried to spin some unbelievable story. The brunette let out a shaky breath. "Maybe I should go," she murmured, edging toward the door. "Stay," Lauren commanded, surprising herself with the assertiveness in her voice. She needed to hear some kind of explanation, no matter how far-fetched. "I want answers, now." Henry lifted his hand as if to touch Lauren's arm, but she pulled away, glaring at him. "I swear, this isn't an affair," he insisted. "Caroline and I—" "Caroline," Lauren repeated, letting the name drape in icy contempt. "So you know her quite well?" Lauren, listen to me, Henry said, voice pleading. He looked over at Caroline, who nodded subtly, as though giving him permission to speak. Caroline is a private investigator. A disbelieving silence filled the room. Rachel's eyebrows shot up, and Lauren found herself momentarily speechless. She had expected Henry to come up with some kind of excuse. But this? A private investigator? Why would you be meeting with a private investigator in a hotel room? Lauren asked, suspicion still dripping from every word. Caroline, whose posture had been tense, cleared her throat. Henry hired me to look into some issues he's been having with a business partner. It's sensitive. We chose this hotel room for confidentiality. We had to meet here to avoid prying eyes. Henry was adamant about keeping it secret from everyone, even you. A swirl of confusion took hold of Lauren. Was he telling the truth? Or was this just a clever alibi? Henry took a step closer, eyes searching hers. I didn't want to involve you, Lauren, because it's dangerous, he said, desperation creeping into his tone. We've been getting threats, blackmail letters. Someone wants to destroy Donovan and Finch. I didn't want you in harm's way. Lauren looked from Henry to Caroline, then back again. The anger in her veins clashed with a flicker of concern for her husband. Threats? Blackmail? Why didn't you just tell me? You know I'd support you no matter what. Henry ran a shaky hand through his hair. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept you away from this, you'd be safe. Caroline picked up a small stack of papers from the bed. This is evidence we've compiled. Someone is funneling money through Henry's company to make it look like he's engaged in fraud. We're trying to trace it back to the source. Lauren stared at the documents. Part of her yearned to believe Henry wholeheartedly, but the damage done by her suspicion and his secrecy wasn't that easy to erase. Why the secrecy to the point of almost losing me? She asked, voice trembling. Henry's face contorted with guilt. I never wanted it to go this far. I'd do anything to keep you safe, even if it meant destroying your trust in me. He couldn't finish, and Lauren felt the tears burning in her eyes. This was not the resolution she'd expected. She had barged in, ready to uncover a filthy affair, only to stumble upon something else entirely a covert operation. Blackmail, and a world of secrets designed, Henry claimed, to keep her out of danger. But even as relief mingled with regret, she couldn't ignore the doubt that still gnawed at her. The seeds of mistrust had been planted, and it would take more than an impromptu confession to uproot them. The story was far from over. The hush of Montgomery Hotel's corridor enveloped the four of them as they stood in uneasy silence. Caroline placed the documents back on the bed, glancing uncertainly at Lauren. I understand this is a shock, she said in a subdued tone. If you want proof of my credentials, I can provide them. Lauren rubbed her temples, wishing she could vanish into thin air. She didn't know Caroline, had never heard the name until tonight, but the desperation in Henry's voice, coupled with Caroline's professional demeanor, made her hesitate. Could Henry really be telling the truth? Rachel, who had quietly observed the entire confrontation, finally spoke. Lauren, maybe we should at least look at what they've gathered. It might help clarify things. Slowly, Lauren walked to the bed, picking up the first page of the stack. It was a photograph of Henry leaving his office, a tall, well-dressed man in sunglasses trailing behind him. Notes scrawled on the back mentioned dates, times, and suspected involvement in the financial irregularities at Donovan and Finch. Gareth Fitzpatrick, Henry said, pointing to the photo. He's our CFO. Caroline found evidence that he's been siphoning money, forging my signature on documents, orchestrating deals with outside shell companies. But the worst part is that he's framing me for it. If it all comes crashing down, I'll be the one carrying the blame for embezzlement. Lauren's stomach churned. If Fitzpatrick was truly behind this, it meant that Henry, the man she still loved, had been a victim, not a villain. The secret meetings with Caroline started to make sense. But still, The idea of Henry lying to her, even if it was for what he believed to be a noble reason, gnawed at her heart. She flipped through more documents, each one revealing a tangled web of transactions, forged letters and threatening notes. Some were chilling in their bluntness, "Keep your mouth shut or else." Others were more cryptic but no less ominous. Caroline's voice was calm but resolute. "I've been tailing Fitzpatrick. We have partial evidence that he's connected to some organized groups who see Donovan and Finch as an easy target. They want to launder money or profit from your downfall. Henry has been trying to gather enough proof to stop him before it's too late." Lauren shook her head, stepping back as if the papers themselves might burn her. "You should have come to me, Henry. This is our life, our marriage. How could you think shutting me out would be okay?" Henry reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Sometimes protecting someone means doing things you hate. I couldn't risk you getting involved in criminal matters, especially not after I received that anonymous threat about you." Lauren's gaze snapped up. "Threat about me?" Henry nodded, regret heavy in his eyes. "A message arrived at my office, accompanied by a photo of you leaving a boutique downtown. The note said, 'Nice family you got there. Would be a shame if something happened.' After that, I knew I had to do whatever it took to keep you out of the crossfire." Rachel's eyes widened, and Lauren felt her world wobble dangerously. Everything was happening so fast. The terror of a potential threat clashed with the relief that Henry might not be cheating on her. But secrets cut deep, no matter how noble the intentions behind them. Caroline cleared her throat. "Lauren, I don't expect you to forgive Henry overnight, but we truly are working together, and it's for your safety as much as his. What happens next is crucial. We're close to bringing this to the authorities, but we need more evidence." Lauren swallowed hard, leaning against the dresser for support. It was too much to take in at once. For months, her marriage had been suffocating under the weight of unspoken fears. Now, the ugliness of blackmail, fraud, and danger threatened them both. She felt torn between anger, betrayal, and a fierce desire to protect Henry despite it all. She finally steadied her gaze on him. "What do we do now?" Henry and Caroline exchanged a determined glance. "We keep going," Caroline said. "We expose Fitzpatrick, gather conclusive evidence, and ensure that the authorities see the truth before he can strike again." Lauren nodded, even though her heart still ached. She took a trembling breath, wondering if their marriage could ever be the same. In that moment, she realized the affair she had feared was the least of their worries. Something far more sinister was at play, and it would take everything she had to stand by Henry's side. Though the hotel confrontation ended with more questions than answers, Lauren found some relief in the truth, if it was indeed the truth. She and Rachel drove home in tense silence, leaving Henry and Caroline to continue their covert meeting. Lauren had insisted on leaving. She needed space to process the revelations. Back at the Donovan mansion, the weight of the day pressed on her like a crushing boulder. Every corner of the opulent house felt colder, emptier. She retreated into the living room, sinking into the cushions of the sofa where she and Henry once laughed over late-night movies. Now, it felt like a stranger's house. Rachel gently placed a hand on Lauren's shoulder. "I can stay if you want," she offered. Lauren appreciated the kindness in her friend's eyes. "No, it's okay," she murmured. "I need some time alone. Just thank you for being there." Rachel nodded, understanding. "Call me if you need anything. Promise?" She left, and Lauren found herself alone with her thoughts once more. Sleep was not an option, so she wandered aimlessly, her footsteps echoing in the grand hall. She stopped by Henry's study, running her fingertips over the polished mahogany desk. Stacks of business reports, architectural plans, and financial statements cluttered the surface. She wondered how many times he'd been in here, sifting through evidence, frantic to protect her and their life from a threat she hadn't even known existed. A swirl of guilt mixed with her anger. Yes, Henry had lied. Yes, he'd withheld crucial information, but he'd done it, he claimed, out of love and fear for her safety. It wasn't an affair, which was the darkest betrayal she'd imagined. Yet secrecy, even for noble reasons, could breed its own destructive consequences. Her trust had been shaken, and that was not something she could simply dismiss. She remembered the day Henry proposed, a warm spring afternoon by the lake, a small band playing in the distance. He slipped the ring on her finger, tears in his eyes. He'd whispered, "I promise to protect you and love you, always." Back then, she'd never questioned that vow. Now, she realized that promise could lead people to do the strangest things. It could make a devoted husband choose shadows over transparency. As dawn approached, she finally went to bed. This time, though, she slept in one of the guest rooms, a silent statement that she needed distance. Henry wasn't home yet, and she didn't wait for him. When she woke up, bleary-eyed, a faint light seeped through the curtains. She padded downstairs and found Henry sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of black coffee. His eyes were red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept. Tension filled the room the moment she stepped in. "Lauren," he said softly, standing up, "I'm sorry if I worried you last night." She stared at him, countless emotions colliding in her mind. "It's going to take time for me to sort this out, Henry," she said finally. He nodded, face etched with remorse. "I understand. Ask me anything and I'll tell you. No more secrets, I promise." She wanted to believe him, but part of her wasn't ready to jump into unconditional trust again. "First, tell me everything you know about these threats and Gareth Fitzpatrick. I want to hear it from you, not just from Caroline." And so Henry told her, in stilted fragments, about how Gareth had grown close to him over the years, even becoming a confidant. The CFO seemed loyal, brilliant with numbers, and instrumental in Donovan and Finch's meteoric rise. But cracks appeared when Henry spotted discrepancies in the accounts. Tiny sums at first, but they grew larger as he investigated. He confronted Gareth privately, but Gareth brushed it off as trivial anomalies. Then came the blackmail letters, the manipulative attempts to turn the board against Henry. The final straw was the threat involving Lauren. That's when he hired Caroline Price, a private investigator with a sterling reputation for handling corporate corruption. Henry confided he'd been terrified that if the criminals saw him involving his wife, she could become a target. As Henry spoke, Lauren absorbed his words, trying to separate fact from potential fabrication. Yet the trembling in his hands and the hoarseness in his voice painted a picture of genuine fear and regret. When he finished, she sighed. "I believe you," she whispered, though her tone carried caution, "but I'm still hurt." Henry's shoulders sagged. "I know. All I can do is ask for your understanding while we put a stop to this. We're close, Lauren. Caroline's onto something. We just need the final piece of evidence." Lauren looked at the man she married, exhausted and desperate for redemption. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's do this. Together." It was a fragile truce, a sliver of restored unity in the midst of chaos. But it was enough. For now, over the following days, Lauren immersed herself in the whirlwind of Henry's covert operation. They set up a temporary workstation in his study, combing through mountains of data, forging a plan to expose Gareth Fitzpatrick. Caroline visited frequently, her demeanor cool and professional. Despite the tension at first, Lauren found herself growing to appreciate Caroline's meticulous nature. Even Rachel joined in on occasion, offering moral support and a fresh perspective. Lauren felt a strange new purpose coursing through her veins. For so long, she'd been left in the dark, imagining the worst about her husband. Now, she was determined to protect him and their marriage. If Gareth wanted a war, she would stand by Henry's side. Late one afternoon, Caroline sat at the study's antique desk, flipping through a folder of suspicious financial statements. "There's a pattern here," she noted, tapping the pages with a manicured finger. "Look at the dates. The discrepancies spike every time Henry goes on a business trip. It's like Gareth times these transactions when you're out of the office." Henry nodded grimly. "He must think I won't notice when I'm traveling. Or maybe he wants to frame me for deals allegedly made in person somewhere else." Lauren leaned over Caroline's shoulder, examining the spreadsheets. "Can we trace the money flow to a final destination?" Caroline blew out a breath. "Working on it. It's layered through multiple shell accounts. I suspect it ends in offshore banks. But one of these accounts," she pointed to a long series of numbers, "is flagged for suspicious activity by Interpol. If we can show that Gareth is the sole operator, we've got him." Henry drummed his fingers on the desk. "We need something conclusive. Bank statements, a recorded admission, anything that nails Gareth without a shred of doubt. The last thing we want is him slipping away on a technicality." Lauren's mind was racing. "You said you had board meetings scheduled for next week, right? Gareth will be there?" "Yes," Henry replied. "He's pushing for a vote of no confidence in me. He's spinning the board into believing I'm behind the missing funds." Caroline's eyes gleamed. "That might work in our favor. If he's that bold, he might slip up. We can set a trap, bring forward partial evidence to provoke him into either making a mistake or revealing his hand." Henry hesitated, then nodded. "I'll need to gather the senior board members, Jacob Stone, Harriet Bryce, and Timothy Wang. They're all old school, loyal to me but also allergic to scandal. If Gareth can't persuade them, he's finished. But if he's threatened, he might lash out." Lauren squeezed Henry's shoulder. "We'll be ready." She felt a surge of determination. Her entire world had been thrown into disarray, but at least now she had clarity. She was part of something bigger than her own fears. The plan would be risky, but if it worked, they'd be free of Gareth's shadow, and maybe, just maybe, she and Henry could start rebuilding the trust they'd lost. Henry covered her hand with his, giving it a gentle press of gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me," he murmured. Lauren managed a small smile. "I'm doing this for us, Henry. That's what marriage is supposed to be, facing life's storms together." Caroline cleared her throat softly, breaking the sentimental moment. "Let's outline the specifics of this plan before Gareth decides to change tactics again." And so, the trio delved into late night strategizing, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and the grim resolve to bring a traitor to justice. None of them could foresee the unexpected twists that would soon turn their carefully laid plan upside down. In the days leading up to the board meeting, the atmosphere in the Donovan mansion crackled with tension. Lauren tried to keep herself steady, but the weight of anticipation bore down relentlessly. Henry, too, seemed on edge, pacing around the house or staying up late with Caroline to refine their strategy. The plan was fairly straightforward: publicly confront Gareth with partial evidence of his misdeeds, force a reaction, and record the outcome, hopefully capturing enough incriminating statements to ensure a solid case against him. But fate had other ideas. On a cool afternoon, just 2 days before the meeting, an unexpected guest arrived at the Donovan mansion. The doorbell rang, echoing ominously through the foyer. Lauren opened the door to find a tall, older man with sharply chiseled features and steely grey hair. His suit was impeccable, though an air of menace clung to him like a shadow. "Good afternoon, Miss S. Donovan," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm Roland Berkeley. Perhaps your husband has mentioned me?" Lauren's pulse quickened. She'd never heard the name before. "No, I don't believe he has," she said warily. "Is there something I can help you with?" Roland offered a thin-lipped smile. "I believe your husband and I have mutual interests. May I come in?" Unease prickled the back of Lauren's neck. She should have told him to schedule an appointment through Henry's office. Yet Roland's quiet confidence held a silent threat. He didn't seem like the type to take no for an answer. Reluctantly, she led him into the living room. "I'll go get Henry," she said. Before she could move, Henry came rushing down the stairs, his expression darkening the moment he laid eyes on the visitor. "Roland," he said tersely, "what are you doing here?" Roland spread his hands in a gesture of mock innocence. "Let's just say I'm worried about the direction your company is taking, and I'd prefer to speak to you in person." Henry's jaw clenched. "Lauren, could you give us a moment?" Lauren hesitated, looking between them. Roland's gaze flicked to her, then back to Henry. "Let her stay," Roland suggested. "We're all adults here." Henry offered his wife a weary nod. "All right." Roland smoothly took a seat. "I've been hearing rumors that you're chasing after ghosts, that you suspect Gareth Fitzpatrick of wrongdoing. My sources indicate you're planning to humiliate him at the next board meeting." Lauren swallowed, wondering how Roland had gleaned such specific information about their plan. Henry stiffened. "Your sources? You mean the same sources who are helping Gareth launder money through my company?" A low chuckle rumbled in Roland's throat. "Come now, Henry, let's not be so dramatic. I merely wanted to caution you about making rash decisions. The world of business is about alliances, and Gareth has made some valuable ones." A surge of anger shot through Lauren. "Alliances that involve blackmailing and threatening us?" Roland waved a hand dismissively. "Let's think big picture. If you go through with this public showdown, the scandal could hurt Donovan and Finch beyond repair, regardless of whether or not you manage to prove Gareth's guilt." Henry's voice trembled with contained fury. "Are you here to threaten me?" "Not at all," Roland said calmly, though his eyes glinted cold. "I'm here to offer a compromise. Work with Gareth. Share in the profits. We'll make sure your name stays clean. And, of course, your lovely wife remains safe." Lauren's stomach churned at the barely veiled warning. Henry's fists clenched at his sides. "I would never let criminals run my company. And I don't take kindly to threats against my wife." Roland sighed, as though disappointed in a stubborn child. "You're determined, I'll give you that. But determination can be so costly. Perhaps you should ask yourself if you're willing to lose everything to stand on principle." A ringing silence followed. Lauren's heart thudded. She could see the tension coiling in Henry's muscles, the moral lines drawn in his face. At last, Henry found his voice. "Get out." Roland stood gracefully, straightening his jacket. "I won't overstay my welcome. Just consider your options, Henry. Some truths are best kept in the dark." He strode to the door, pausing briefly to flash Lauren a disconcerting smile. Then he was gone, leaving a residue of dread in his wake. Lauren turned to Henry, who was visibly shaking. "That's who we're up against," she whispered. Henry nodded, expression grim. One of them, anyway. In that moment, Lauren felt the weight of their choice. The path they'd chosen was dangerous, and the enemies they faced were powerful. But her resolve hardened. They had to press on. There was no turning back now. The day of the board meeting arrived like a thunderclap. Henry, Lauren, and Caroline had strategized meticulously, planning to present enough evidence to corner Gareth Fitzpatrick. The large glass-walled conference room at Donovan and Finch was filled with tension, board members shifting uneasily in their seats. Some eyed Henry with concern. Others watched Gareth, who projected an air of smug confidence. Lauren sat beside Henry, her hands clasped beneath the table to hide her trembling. She wore a poised, elegant suit, determined to present a united front with her husband. Caroline, inconspicuously seated at the back, kept her camera phone ready to record. Gareth opened the proceedings, launching into a monologue about mismanaged funds and questionable business practices. He pointed an accusing finger at Henry, weaving a story that implicated the CEO in clandestine deals. The board members Jacob Stone, Harriet Bryce, Timothy Wang, among others, listened in stony silence. At last, Henry stood. "I appreciate your concerns, Gareth," he said, voice clipped with controlled anger. But before we proceed with any confidence vote, I'd like to address these allegations and offer a different perspective. He motioned for the lights to dim, and a projector clicked on. Images of bank statements, forged documents, and wire transfers flickered onto the screen. Lauren explained the discrepancies, pointing out that Henry's digital signature had been falsified. She felt her heart pound as she spoke, but she forced herself to remain steady. In light of these irregularities, it's clear there is a pattern of fraud, Lauren concluded. We suspect it's been orchestrated by someone with access to our highest accounts. All eyes shifted to Gareth. His smug expression wavered, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl. "This is preposterous," he hissed. "You're trying to frame me to cover your own mistakes." Henry pressed a button, and a new slide appeared, a damning email chain between Gareth and Roland Berkeley, discussing secret accounts. "These are your accounts, Gareth," Henry said. "We have the digital trail. It leads right to you." Gareth stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Enough," he roared. "This entire charade is a setup. And you." He pointed a shaking finger at Henry. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Caroline discreetly kept her phone camera rolling from behind a large potted plant. She zoomed in on Gareth's furious face, capturing every word. Jacob Stone, an elderly board member known for his calm demeanor, cleared his throat. "Gareth, if you have evidence to the contrary, please present it." Gareth's face hardened. He shot a glance at the door, his eyes flickering with desperation. Then, to everyone's shock, he lunged forward. With a swift motion, he grabbed a folder from Henry's seat, ripping out several documents. "You think you can pin this on me?" he snarled, scanning the pages. "We have powerful allies, Henry. You can't possibly win." Everything erupted at once. Harriet Bryce stood, calling for security. Timothy Wang pushed away from the table, looking shaken. Lauren tried to grab the papers from Gareth's hands. Caroline leapt from the sidelines, phone still recording. Chaos filled the conference room. Gareth sidestepped Lauren, nearly knocking her over, and made a dash for the door. 2 security guards rushed in, but Gareth was quick. He shoved one aside, elbowed another, and sprinted down the hallway. Henry raced after him, Lauren close behind, her heels clacking on the polished floors. Caroline trailed with the phone, capturing the entire chase. Down the corridor they ran, weaving past startled employees. Finally, Gareth reached the stairwell, but Henry tackled him at the top step. Both men tumbled, sending painful echoes through the concrete staircase. Gareth tried to wrestle free, but Henry pinned him. Security guards arrived moments later, panting. It was over. Gareth Fitzpatrick was detained, and the evidence was out in the open. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Lauren rushed to Henry's side, breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked up at her, relief and exhaustion warring on his face. The threat that had loomed over them for months was subdued, at least for now. But Gareth's final words as they hauled him away echoed in the hallway. "You haven't seen the last of us. We're everywhere." The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind. The board convened an emergency session, deciding to suspend Gareth and hand over all evidence to the authorities. Caroline handed over her recorded footage, along with her investigative documentation. Henry exhaled a shuddering breath, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. Lauren, still trembling with adrenaline, could barely process that it was finally done. Yet the sense of triumph proved fleeting. The following day, as they met with lawyers and prepared for potential legal battles, another storm broke. Rachel Morgan called Lauren in a panic. "Turn on the news, now!" Lauren grabbed the remote, flipping to a local station. There, a grim-faced reporter stood in front of Donovan and Finch's headquarters, microphones swirling around him. The headline read, "Shocking allegations, Henry Donovan under investigation." Lauren's heart lurched. The reporter spoke. This morning, an anonymous source leaked documents suggesting Henry Donovan masterminded an elaborate fraud scheme at Donovan and Finch, implicating him in millions of dollars of illegal transactions. Our sources say law enforcement has opened a formal probe. She turned to Henry, eyes wide with horror. What? How is this possible? We just exposed Gareth. Why are they coming after you? Henry looked stunned. They're using the same fabricated evidence Gareth created, and maybe more. Roland must be behind this. They're flipping the narrative against me. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Caroline, who had stayed the night in a guest room, rushed down the stairs. Henry went to answer, opening the door to two stern-faced detectives. One flashed a badge. "Henry Donovan, we have a warrant to search the premises." Lauren stood behind Henry, her heart pounding. Caroline exchanged a worried glance with them, but nodded for Henry to comply. Fighting the search would only make him look more guilty. With resigned dread, Henry stepped aside. "Please, come in." The detective swept through the house, rummaging through documents, computers, and anything else that might serve as evidence. Lauren stood by helplessly, forced to watch them dismantle their privacy. A swirl of panic and fury churned in her stomach. Meanwhile, Henry made calls to his legal team, voice wavering with barely contained anger. Caroline tried to reassure Lauren. "They won't find anything. We have all the real evidence to exonerate Henry." But Lauren wasn't so sure. If Gareth and his powerful allies like Roland had orchestrated a smear campaign, it was possible they planted false trails. Henry's rightful innocence could be buried under a mountain of manufactured evidence. By the time the detectives left, the entire estate was in disarray. Boxes of Henry's files were seized, along with several computers. One detective turned to him sternly. "Mr. Donovan, don't leave town. We'll be in touch." The door closed, leaving a suffocating silence behind. Henry pressed his forehead against the wall, his shoulders shaking in silent rage. Lauren touched his back gently. "We'll get through this. We'll clear your name." Henry turned, eyes blazing. "We did everything right. We caught Gareth red-handed, and now they're turning it on me." Caroline cleared her throat. "We need to move fast. I'll analyze the situation. If they leaked false documents, there must be a way to trace it back to Gareth or Roland." Lauren took a steadying breath. "We have to fight. We've come too far to let them ruin our lives." Even as her words came out, she felt a knot of fear in her stomach. Fighting might mean stepping further into the dangerous arena Henry had tried to shield her from. There would be no going back to the life of blissful ignorance she once knew. But it didn't matter. They were in this together now, for better or worse. With Henry's reputation under attack, the circle of people he could trust grew smaller. The day after the search, calls from anxious board members poured in. Some expressed support, but others distanced themselves, fearful of a public relations catastrophe. Donovan and Finch's stocks took a hit, and rumors swirled through the city. Lauren sat in the living room with Caroline, scanning news sites and social media. Story after story painted Henry as a cunning manipulator. It stung to see the man she knew who valued honesty and integrity portrayed as a villain. Rachel Morgan arrived mid-morning, a swirl of energy. "I've been pulling every string I can to quiet the tabloids," she said, setting her laptop down. "But it's an uphill battle. The rumors keep multiplying." Henry joined them, cheeks pale with exhaustion. He hadn't slept much, worried about the case. "We need a statement," he said. "Something to counter the lies." Caroline nodded. "A press conference might help, but we need tangible evidence. Something that proves Gareth's wrongdoing and your innocence in one fell swoop." Rachel snapped her fingers. "What about that offshore account you were investigating? If we can link Gareth's personal data to those transactions definitively, it'll overshadow the planted evidence." Caroline tapped at her keyboard. "Yes, exactly. I've been trying to crack it, but it's hidden behind layers of encryption. We might need a cyber expert." Henry frowned. "That'll take time we don't have. The longer these allegations fester, the more people believe them." Silence fell over the group, tension thick in the air. Suddenly, Lauren remembered something. "Wait, Gareth snatched a folder during the boardroom chaos, but we got some of it back, right? Is there anything in those documents that could tie him to the offshore accounts?" Henry rummaged through the disheveled pile on the coffee table. "Yes, these are the ones we recovered from him. Caroline, see if there's anything that stands out." Caroline combed through the papers, reading intently. Then her eyes lit up. "This page is a partial bank statement. Look at the bottom. There's an account number matching one of the suspicious shell companies we identified." Henry leaned over her shoulder. "The transaction date. It coincides with the day Gareth had a business trip in Bermuda." Rachel broke into a triumphant smile. "That's huge. If we can show proof that Gareth accessed that account from Bermuda where the shell company is registered, then we've got a direct link." He can't pin that on Henry. Excitement buzzed among them. Caroline carefully scanned the rest of the recovered documents. "We'll cross-reference these details with flight logs, hotel records, anything that puts Gareth in Bermuda. At the same time, money was moved through that shell account." Henry nodded grimly. "Then we'll present it to the authorities, along with the rest of our data." Lauren squeezed his hand. "We're close, Henry. We're going to clear your name." Despite the ongoing turmoil, a glimmer of hope flickered to life. For the first time since the disastrous board meeting, they had a solid lead that could expose Gareth and, by extension, Roland and their sinister network. Working together, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Truth, they believed, would prevail. After days of non-stop investigating, Henry, Lauren, and Caroline finally linked Gareth Fitzpatrick's shady transactions to a network of shell companies. With board member Jacob Stone's help, they secured a secret meeting with District Attorney Miriam Downey. Calm yet formidable, Downey examined their evidence, financial statements, email chains, and Caroline's documentation, and deemed it credible enough to pursue charges. Buoyed by her support, they left the meeting feeling hopeful. But that night, Henry got a call from Roland Berkeley. Speaking with cold arrogance, Roland warned Henry to abandon his crusade or face devastating consequences. Lauren's blood ran cold at the explicit threat to harm not just Henry, but her as well. Though shaken, the Donovans and Caroline refused to back down. Gareth was only a pawn in a much larger game, and Roland was making it clear there were bigger forces at play. Despite the looming danger, they pressed forward, knowing the truth was finally within reach. In the wake of Gareth Fitzpatrick's arrest, a wave of relief swept through Donovan and Finch. At long last, the fraudster faced charges of embezzlement and conspiracy, and the once relentless media storm against Henry began to subside. Yet the victory felt precarious. As Henry watched news coverage of Gareth being led away in handcuffs, he sensed the threat was not entirely gone. Deep down, he knew there were others pulling the strings. That lingering dread crystallized when an unknown number called Henry at home. Lauren stood beside him as he answered, heart pounding at the unmistakable voice of Roland Berkeley. Calm, yet menacing, Roland congratulated Henry on catching Gareth, but warned him that powerful allies still lurked in the shadows. When Henry refused Roland's demand to drop any further investigations, Roland's tone turned chilling. "You'll regret this." The line went dead, leaving a sense of foreboding in its wake. A few days later, Roland himself walked into Donovan and Finch as if he owned the place, sneering at security measures. Confronting Henry in his executive office, Roland made one final offer: abandon the pursuit of Gareth's network and keep Donovan and Finch intact, or see both the company and Henry's family suffer. Lauren, seated nearby, felt her blood run cold at the ultimatum. Henry refused. His defiance ignited Roland's fury. In a moment of desperation, Roland seized a concealed gun from Henry's desk, startling them all. With a roar, he aimed it at Henry. Lauren screamed, scrambling to protect her husband. In the chaos, a security guard tackled Roland just as the weapon discharged. The bullet pierced the ceiling instead of Henry's chest, and the office filled with shocked cries. Pinned to the ground, Roland spat threats. "I have allies everywhere. This isn't over." But as armed guards hauled him away, Henry and Lauren clung to each other, breathless with relief. A sense of finality settled over the room. The ringleader behind Gareth Fitzpatrick's treachery had revealed his hand, and he'd lost. In the aftermath, investigators seized Roland's documents and phone records, tying him to a wider criminal network. Once again, Henry cooperated fully, relieved that the full truth was at last surfacing. As the authorities delved deeper, the Donovan family braced for any remaining surprises. They had walked through fire to reach this moment. Henry might still face legal hurdles. The company's reputation still needed repair. But at last, the looming menace had a face, and that face was now in custody. Side by side, Lauren and Henry realized they had survived the storm. After all their fears and misunderstandings, what truly mattered was that they had refused to abandon each other, even when it felt like the entire world was against them. In the days after Roland's arrest and Gareth's downfall, Henry Donovan finally found peace. The authorities dismantled large parts of the criminal network threatening Donovan and Finch, and the public's opinion shifted, seeing Henry as a victim of betrayal, not its perpetrator. Through it all, Lauren remained by his side, determined to reclaim the life they'd nearly lost. Their marriage, tested by secrecy and danger, emerged stronger. One morning, Lauren discovered Henry in the kitchen, making breakfast, something he hadn't done in months. They quietly reflected on how fear and distrust had almost torn them apart. Over steaming coffee, they vowed never again to keep each other in the dark. Though the legal aftermath was messy, the truth ultimately prevailed. Gareth faced multiple convictions, and Roland Berkeley was charged for his violent attack and conspiracy. Donovan and Finch began rebuilding its reputation with a renewed emphasis on honesty and transparency, something both Henry and Lauren were committed to protecting. In the end, the night Lauren spotted her husband entering that hotel with a supposed mistress marked only the beginning of a harrowing journey, one revealing a plot far more sinister than simple infidelity. The ordeal taught them that real love, tested by the darkest suspicions, can be reforged into something unbreakable. And as each new dawn lit their once troubled estate, Lauren and Henry lived by a hard-won pledge: face everything together, no matter the cost. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of secrets, suspense, and ultimately, renewal. From the moment Lauren feared her millionaire husband was creeping into a lavish hotel with a mistress, to the shocking revelation of a high-stakes conspiracy, their journey reminds us how easily trust can shatter and how courageously it can be reclaimed. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected twists, hidden agendas, and unwavering love, please support our channel by hitting the like button, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and, of course, subscribing for more dramatic tales. Every like and subscription helps us bring you bigger, bolder stories, ones that keep you on the edge of your seat and remind you of the indomitable spirit that resides within us all. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community, and we look forward to sharing more real-life drama fiction with you soon.